Hello, geometry students. Welcome to lesson 9. In the previous lesson, we learned about formulas and how to apply certain formulas to geometry. In this lesson, we're going to learn one of those formulas that you'll have to have memorized that we're going to use quite often, and that is the distance formula. We've already talked a little bit about distance and we've talked about formulas, so let's dive right in. We're just going to remind ourselves the definition of a formula. It's a mathematical relationship expressed with symbols, usually in the form of an equation. So you're going to expect if this lesson is entirely about a formula, at the end of this lesson, there's going to be an equation that you're expected to memorize. It's going to be called the distance equation or the distance formula. We'll call it the distance formula. And then we're going to base this sort of on two other formulas that we have. One of them was related to the ruler postulate. Do you remember this formula? On a number line, we can calculate distance by taking one distance minus another, one location minus another. We find the absolute value of that, and that gives us the distance. So for example, here's the example we looked at when we learned this ruler postulate formula. And what we did is we just looked at two positions on the number line. In this case, it's 1 and -3, okay? And we plug in those values for A2 and A1. So in this case, it's going to be 1 minus -3. 1 minus -3 is 4. The absolute value of that is 4, so the distance between these 2 points is 4. This is a one-dimensional distance formula, okay? But it's not the actual distance formula yet. It's just part of what we're going to apply. I just want to point out, if we wanted to switch around A2 and A1, let's say we make this first point A2 and the second point A1, the ruler postulate still works for us. So it's going to be -3 minus 1, which is -4. And then we're going to take the absolute value of that, which becomes 4 again. So either way, this works. All right, so that's our basic way of calculating distance. And that's going to bring us to our distance formula now, which is going to relate to that, and it's also going to relate to another theorem that we learned, the Pythagorean theorem. We're going to see how this relates to the Pythagorean theorem in just a bit. But in a coordinate plane, so we're not just talking about one dimension, we're talking about not just one number line, we're talking about two number lines that intersect at a right angle. That's what a coordinate plane is. The distance between 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, is given by the formula. And this is the distance formula you need to remember. D equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Wait, where do those values x2 minus x1 and y2 minus y1 come from? Well, do you see that these look exactly like our one-dimensional distance from up above here? And that's exactly what they are. This is the distance in the x dimension between 2 points and the distance in the y dimension between 2 points. Why don't we have an absolute value sign around them like we had up above? Well, instead of an absolute value sign, we end up squaring them, which does the same thing. That's an important thing for you to remember. When you square a negative number, you get a positive. When you square a positive number, you get a positive. So squaring something does something similar to what the absolute value does, and that it always returns a positive number. So I don't need to put an absolute value symbol in here. That would be redundant because it's already going to be made positive by this. All right, now, I said this is like the Pythagorean theorem, and you'll see that a little more if I put, instead of having a square root symbol on the right side, what if I square both sides and I have d squared equals x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So do you see how this is like a squared plus b squared equals c squared, except my letters are different? And instead of just having a and b, I have these distance equations, x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1. All right, so let's take a look at the distance formula in practice here. Here I have a line segment connecting 2 points, and I want to know what the distance is between those 2 points. How would I do this? Why, I could just plug in values into my distance formula. So d equals the square root. I'm just going to do d squared for now, okay? D squared. And we're going to say that that equals x2 is 5 minus 1. 5 minus 1 are my two x values, but I have to square that. It's going to be 5 minus 1 squared. And then plus y2 is 4. y1 is 1, so 4 minus 1, and that value is going to be squared. All right, well, if I simplify this, I find that d squared equals, and let's see here, it's going to be 5 minus 1 squared is, 5 minus 1 is 4, I'm going to square that, I'm going to get 16, plus 4 minus 1 is 3, I square that, I get 9. Wait, so 16 plus 9 is 25. D squared equals 25. That means that the distance d equals 5. So I'd be able to plug in 5 instead of d. I calculated the distance from here to here is 5 units. Now, do you see how I use the Pythagorean theorem? I just want to make sure that I drive that point home. Notice that I could overlay a right triangle on our diagram over here. And x2 minus x1 is this bottom side length. y2 minus y1 is this side length. Notice that to get this side length, I'm not just going to plug in y, which would be 4. I have to subtract this y down here. That's not, there's no side length down here extending all the way down. How do I do that? Well, I subtract 4 minus 1. So this side length is 3. Down here, I'm going to do 5 minus 1. 5 is the y coordinate, x coordinate of this point, the x coordinate of this point, but my side length doesn't stretch all the way along the x-axis. It's missing this 1 here, so I have to do 5 minus 1 to find the bottom side. And then that gives me my two sides. What do I do with those? I square each one, and then I take the square root to figure out what the distance is. This is the hypotenuse. The distance is the hypotenuse of a right triangle. All right, so hopefully this helps you understand the distance formula a little better. We're going to be working some practice problems in the next video.